Testing 1 2. All right, perfect. Welcome everyone to another coffee tasting. I'm your host Aaron Taylor, and today we are tasting Zambia Ngoli Estate. This is a really delicious coffee. One of my favorite parts about this coffee is how different it is to your traditional cup of coffee that you get at any regular place. What makes it different is the bright, peppery notes with the grapefruit and the sweet date. And so, with the flavor notes that we get from this particular cup of coffee is vastly different than anything that we normally get, which makes it really nice because normally when you try a cup of coffee and you compare it to another coffee, like say like the next day, you're not really going to be able to discern the different flavor notes because of how similar a lot of coffees are. But with this one, because it's so different, you can try it and you immediately know right off the bat the different flavor notes of this coffee. So, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome. It is an honor to have you. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. It is an honor to have you back here to help you learn a little bit more about coffee, where it comes from, and how it impacts the farmers. A lot of cool stories. That's one of my favorite things about the small coffees that we taste on this channel and just the different stories that we learn. So, for those of you who are new to the channel, one of the things that I really like to do is I really like to brew my coffee 3 different ways. That way we get to explore the different flavor notes of the coffee that come from the different brewing methods. So with the different brewing methods, we're going to get a different amount of oils and sediments that make its way into our cup. And the different amounts of oils and sediments are going to impact the flavor. Even though we're brewing the same brew of coffee or the blend of coffee beans, it's going to have a different flavor profile depending on the brew method, and it all takes part in the amount of oils and sediments that makes its way into our cup. And so making sure that we brew our coffee is really important, and there are fundamentals to the brewing. And so there's the freshness, the grind, and proportion. So making sure that our beans are fresh, and then making sure that the grind is on the proper grind setting for the brew process, and then also making sure that we have the right amount of grinds and the right amount of water to making sure that we're getting the right proportions and the right flavor that the coffee is intended to taste like. And the reason why that's important is so that we can have a good cup of coffee, but not just so that we can have a good cup of coffee, but also it's paying tribute to the hard work that goes into making this coffee make its way to our countertop or our table. Because the amount of work that goes into harvesting the beans, making sure that the quality control, that we're picking the ripest cherries out of the bush, and then the process in what it takes to wash the beans or sun dry the beans. All these different processes that it takes, makes its way to our table is a lot of work. And for us, if we mess up the brew process at the very end of the line, we're kind of doing a disservice to all that work that was done before it made its way to our table. So one of the first things that we do on the pour over is or the pour over in our Chemex is we do a little a bloom pour. And so when we bloom our coffee, we're letting all that air rise to the surface. So there's a little bit of air in between the individual grinds. And so if we pour too much water, we're kind of forcing that air down to the bottom, and we kind of create air pockets that slow down the brewing process. And so by saturating the grinds and letting all that air rise to the surface before we continue our brew process, is going to ensure that the brew process lasts the proper amount of time that it's supposed to take. And that way we don't end up over steeping our coffee and making it taste too bitter or too bright or whatever the case might be for that blend of coffee. So a lot of the time, people ask me what is the best brew process there is, and if you ask me, there is no best brew process. It's all about what flavors you're looking for. If you're looking for more of the bright citrusy notes, if you're looking for more of the bitter, earthy chocolate notes, it's all about trying to find your favorite flavor profile. And so for me, I like the more bitter chocolate notes or the earthy tones. And so I tend to go for more of the French press, and I will lean more towards Chemex. And the reason why is just because of the flavor notes that we get from the different brew processes. With the French press, we're going to get the oils and the sediments. And so with the large amount of sediments that's going to make its way to our cup, we're going to get a lot of those bitter notes, those either bitter chocolates or bitter earthy notes. While the pour over, we're going to filter out a lot of those sediments, but we're going to allow some of those oils to pass through the filter. And by allowing us to have more oils to sediment ratio, it's going to give us a brighter cup of coffee. And so it's going to allow us to taste more like those citrusy notes or the bright floral notes, whatever the bright notes will be. And in this case, it's going to be like that black currant flavor. And it's going to give us a little bit more of that peppery flavor in the pour over. And in the Chemex, one of the reasons why I will tend to lean more towards the Chemex is because the Chemex has that triple paper filter, and it's going to allow the paper filter to absorb more of those oils that would normally make its way into the cup of coffee. And by absorbing some more of those oils, it's going to tone down the brightness of the cup, allowing us to taste more of those bitters. And so it's not going to be as strong as the French press, but we're still going to get that more bitter earth notes or chocolate notes that come forward in the Chemex cup of coffee. So that's why I would prefer the Chemex. And it's all about finding those flavor profile notes that you like yourself is going to help determine the brew method that you like, or even the coffee region that you like to brew from. And because that's also really important too, because with the African coffees, they're typically sun dried, not always, but typically sun dried, just because of the region that they live in. It allows them to sun dry their coffee because they have a drier climate. But if you have like a wetter climate like Indonesia or certain parts of Latin America, you just don't have the option to sun dry. And if you do choose to sun dry, it just requires so much work to make sure that mold is forming and all that other stuff. And so that's why in those regions we tend to go for like a fully washed or semi-washed, just because it's a lot easier for the farmers to maintain quality on the process, just because of the humidity level, and the environment just allows for more bacteria to grow in like the wetter regions. So that has an impact on how the processes are chosen, how we process our coffee, and then how we process our coffee is going to impact the flavors of our coffee. And so whether or not we're going to get some really heavy bourbon bourbon notes or chocolate notes or earthy notes, or whether or not we're going to get some bright citrusy notes. And so with this coffee is a sun-dried coffee, and so it is going to have that more brighter flavor, even when it's brewed on like a French press or the Chemex, just because we're getting a lot of those citrusy oil notes from the actual cherry itself during the sun-dried process. And so that's how that coffee impacts the flavor. And so that's what's really cool about these small lot coffees, is because they come from very distinct regions of the world, they're very limited, but not only are they very limited, but they have their own specialty processes that they choose. The farmers choose these processes for a reason, to bring out specific flavors that they're looking for. And that's another reason why it's really important to brew our coffee correctly, is because the farmers and the roasters together, they kind of create this flavor profile that they are intending to create for us to taste at the table. And the only way we're going to taste the flavor profiles that are intended for us to taste is by properly brewing our coffee. And with each individual small lot coffee, they're all going to have their own flavors. And it's just really cool to be able to experience all the different flavors that are brought to us through coffee in different regions of the world and through different processing methods. It's really cool. And then my favorite part about these small lot coffees is how coffee impacts the people who grow the coffee, and just some of the cool innovations that coffee growers are doing to make better livelihoods, not just for themselves, but for future generations. So it's really, really cool. So now we're going to get into tasting the coffee. And then after we taste the coffee, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about where the coffee comes from and how the land of Zambia has been shaped over the past couple decades. So we're going to start off the coffee tasting with the French press today. With the French press, we're getting the full amount of sediments and the full amount of oils, which is going to give us a full flavored, full bodied cup of coffee. We're going to get all the flavor notes that is intended in this cup. And so with this, we're getting notes of sweet date, grapefruit, and black currant. And that black currant's going to give us a little bit of a peppery flavor, and then that grapefruit is going to give us a pretty zesty bright side, and then the sweet date is just going to mellow out and give us a little bit of sweetness to it. So immediately off the bat with the French press, I'm getting that bright lemon pepper flavor from that, or just that peppery flavor with a little bit of that bright zest coming from the grapefruit. So it almost gives it a lemon pepper flavor. It's very interesting. Like I said, this is a one of a kind coffee, much different than what you would normally taste in your normal cup of coffee when you go to like a gas station or a breakfast shop where you would get like a basic Colombian coffee. This is much different than that. So just by tasting this coffee by itself, you're immediately right off the bat gonna notice different flavor notes and how wildly different this is compared to just your average cup of coffee. Really good. I like this coffee just for exploring the different flavor notes that coffees have to offer. It's definitely not my favorite because of that pepperiness can be a little bit off-putting if you're not prepared for it because it's not a flavor note that you would typically associate with coffee. But if you were to say like drink this coffee with a nice steak, you'd probably not even taste the pepper. Um, flavor because of the pairing. It just goes so well with the steak that it would just blend in together. So this would make for a great dinner coffee, I would say. And so now we're gonna go straight to the pour over. With the pour over, we're getting the oils and no sediments, and so we're gonna end up with a much brighter cup of coffee. So we're gonna end up with a lot more of those grapefruit notes and a little bit of a brighter peppery flavor. So immediately right off the bat, I'm definitely getting a large aroma of that black currant that gives us that pepper, excuse me, that pepperiness. Oh yeah. So immediately right off the bat, I'm getting almost all of that bright black pepper flavor, and then I'm getting a little bit of that grapefruit flavor, but it's mainly that pepper flavor that's dominating the cup right now. And then we get a little bit of that the date sweetness, just a little bit there, but we're mainly getting that pepper and grapefruit flavor that's giving us a really, really bright cup of coffee. It's very, very intense, very smooth, but very different in flavor. So now we're going to taste the Chemex. So with the Chemex, this is the triple paper filter, and so we're filtering out some more of those oils, and we're getting more of or not more of the sediments, but we're just bringing those oil levels down with the sediments that have been already brought way down with the paper filter. So it's giving us a more even cup of coffee, kind of giving us an even playing field between the oils and the sediments, giving us a more balanced cup, allowing us to taste more of the we're going to taste more of that sweet date coming through in this one. So immediately right off the bat, I'm definitely not getting as much of that black currant aroma that's coming off the top. And I'm definitely getting a little bit more of a sweet and bright flavor from it. Like we're getting more of the grapefruit and a little bit more of that sweet date. Oh yeah. So with this, the black currant has definitely taken a back seat in the flavor. It's still there, but it's definitely not as predominant. We're getting a lot more of the date flavor, and then with a little bit of the brightness from that grapefruit bright flavor. And so it's definitely much smoother. If I had to choose a favorite amongst these three coffees, I would probably choose the Chemex just because it's really toning down that bright peppery flavor versus these two, and it's really allowing that the bitter sweet date flavor to come forward. And so it's much more pleasant in my opinion on the Chemex versus the French press and the pour over. I'm going to go back to the French press so I can compare the two directly against each other. Very similar in flavor, these two. It's just the French press is much more intense in the flavor notes, which allows that black currant pepperiness to come forward. And so the Chemex is definitely my favorite of the three brew methods for the Zambia Ngoli estate. That is delicious. If you guys get a chance to try it at your local reserve Starbucks, I would definitely recommend it. It's really, really good, especially since it's a one of a kind flavor. You're not going to get a flavor like that from any other coffee. So it's definitely definitely a must try for sure. So now we're going to learn a little bit about Zambia, the Ngoli estate itself, and the history of this country. And so with Zambia, it actually gained its independence um, in 1964. Sorry, guys. So Zambia gained its independence in 1964 on October 24th, and it had got a newly elected Prime Minister, Kenneth Kaunda, and he was actually president of Zambia between 1964 and 1991, and he was in charge of the United Nation Independence Party, or UNIP, and it was a socialist party, and it was a one party government, and so that means you didn't have like the different opposing parties like the Republicans and the Democrats and all these different, like, the Green Party and all these different people who with different. So you had this government that was a one party government, and it was a socialist party, and so um, even though they had gained their own independence, they were going through a lot of their own struggles and growth. And it wasn't until after 91 when the Frederick Chiluba um, was elected as prime minister of Zambia, and he reigned in an era of multi-party government. So now they're a multi-party government and also social economic development. So what's really cool about the social economic development part is how they did a lot of experimentation in agriculture and trying to rehabilitate the land. And with Zambia, it's actually one of the it's known as one of the quickly rehabilitated lands from colonization. And so even though they had their land taken away from them or they were colonized by the British for farming purposes, um, they rebounded and have come back in such an astounding way and have been able to make changes in their society for the better, and they have gone through peaceful transitions of power, which is really important in that part of the world where you got a lot of conflicting views and people who think that something else should be this way and something should be that way, and it gets pretty violent. And so for a nation or a country in this part of the world to um, go into a state of where they're having peaceful transitions of power and going through social economic development. It's just really amazing. And then coffee has a big part to play in the development of Zambia. because it was one of the chosen crops to help revitalize the agriculture of this land. And when it first began, it was actually run by the government of Zambia, but because of the limited funding that the government had, the first initial test phases of this agricultural development in this land, it failed. And so what had happened was the development of the agriculture ended up in private hands. And so with the private funding and the dedication of knowing what the land was capable of and just making sure that everything was organized and ran efficiently, we were able to uh, rehabilitate the land and successfully create a farms that can provide a sustainable economy for a group of people. And then what's also great about it is it opens up the door for other agricultural fields and allowing them to get into growing other types of food, whatever they're capable of growing. And then what's particularly cool about the Zambia Ngoli estate is just like the kind of innovations that all the different farmers are going through. And with the Ngoli estate, they choose to do ethical beekeeping. And with the ethical beekeeping, it allows them to have their own source of honey. And with that extra source of a commodity, it gives them a little bit of extra income. So what it's doing is it's allowing them to maximize their profits. And it's really cool because not only are they committing themselves to agricultural science and developing the land and rehabilitating the area, they're also taking upon other practices to help the environment, like beekeeping and allowing the bees to help spread the pollen. And then it's kind of like a coexist where the bees help the land and the farmers get to reap what the bees sow. And so it's really cool how all these different decisions that these farmers are making all around the world are impacting and shaping the environment around us and just really inspiring other farmers to see what they can do to make an impact on their environment and also socio economy and just helping drive the world to a better place. And so it's really cool to learn all these stories on like what kind of steps can be taken in different parts of the world to make the world a better place in terms of agricultural science, rehabilitating the land, creating better lives for the people of the farmers, or not even just the farmers, but by having a stronger economy through a strong crop to have, you're allowing yourself to pour more money into the economy. So this coffee doesn't directly affect not only directly affects the farmers, but directly affects the people of the entire community from the sales that the coffee farmers make. And so it's really cool because when the more money the farmers make, the more money they're allowed to spend on other things, and the more money they spend on other things, it pours that money back into their community. And with the a strong economy in a community allows them to grow and thrive and even gives them a budget to experiment on other things to make their community even better and makes changes in their sociology and all that other stuff. So it's really cool to see all the different changes happening around the world and how coffee just surrounds it all and how it's a part of all the things in the everyday life for a lot of us and how it can just be tied to everything. And so thank you everyone for joining me in today's little history lesson about Zambia and how they came to grow coffee and how they went through their small little growth after gaining independence from the United Kingdom in 1964. So it's just it's a really young history in terms of coffee, but it's really cool and really important to learn about it just so that we can avoid to make the same mistakes, and then we can also pay tribute to the people who do what they do to make this coffee happen. And for a lot of people in that part of the world, it is no easy task to keep doing what they do, just because it's a dangerous world, and the only way to make it better and to make it a safer place for everyone is to help them change and learn these stories, and share these stories so that we can all learn and grow. So thank you everyone for joining me today's coffee tasting. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys enjoyed the coffee tasting, click the link above. That's going to be a list of videos of coffee tastings in the past, and the link down below is just going to be a video that YouTube thinks you might like. Thanks again everyone for joining. I will see you next Tuesday. Have a great week.